Welcome to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, the weekly radio news magazine that we put together here at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy so that you have the information at your fingertips that will keep you from getting just wound up in some of the mostly peaceful conversations that I'm sure are happening around the barbecue pits of Virginia. Joining us this week, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Supreme Court rulings how they relate to you at the receiving end of this radio program or podcast if you're getting us off of our YouTube channel where you can go and find archives of it. We're going to begin with the Carson ruling. May have gotten lost in the coverage of Dobbs or even Kennedy. But last week, Carson v. Macon was one of the Supreme Court's first landmark rulings in which they said the state cannot prohibit scholarship money, if made available, from going to a school just based on the fact that they may be a parochial school. And joining us from the Middle Resolution, Craig DiSesa is on the Newsmakers line with us. They've just started an effort on the side of educational opportunities in Virginia. Craig, welcome to Freedom and Prosperity Radio. How are you doing, sir?
I'm well. Thanks for having me, Joe. I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk more about this. Really, it is a landmark ruling here at the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I've had to explain to people, no, I'm not talking about that Supreme Court. I'm talking about, they did that too. Yes, they did that too. Because for so long, and I'm not sure if it's 10 years or more that I've been talking to folks in the school choice world, probably ever since Barack Obama told us the story of how Malia and Sasha made him change his mind on the D.C. scholarship program because, quote, all of their friends would have to leave school if he canceled it, which made me really think that, if there's not a better testimony about what school choice can be, money follows the child's school choice. Here are poor working class kids from Washington, D.C., one of the poorest countries in the nation, going to the same school as the daughters of the President of the United States. If there's not a better story about why school choice should work and why we should all have opportunities with it, it's that. But over all that time, I keep getting told, no, Blaine Amendment, Virginia Act for Religious Freedom, can't give state money to a church and a parochial school, blah, blah, blah. And finally, we have court precedent that starts saying, no, that's not what happens.
That is correct. Actually, there have been 3 court cases in the last 5 years, Supreme Court decisions, that have sort of chipped away at the Blaine Amendment. I don't know, does your audience know or understand what the Blaine Amendment is?
Well, we get into the granddaddy of them, which is Thomas Jefferson's Virginia Act for Religious Freedom that, I guess was, as I understand the history of it, he wrote it because he was concerned that churches being freed from the Church of England were seeing a downturn in attendance, and they were petitioning the Virginia government for a tax on people to give to the churches. And he said, no, we got to make sure that people aren't being taxed just to pay for the church. And so that sort of precedes a lot of what a lot of the states have a modern Blaine amendments just prohibiting schools, parochial institutions, churches from getting taxpayer money.
Yeah, that's correct. Well, there was a congressman named Congressman Blaine back in the, I want to say, 1870s. And he was trying to get a U.S. constitutional amendment that prevented what he called public money going to religious-affiliated schools. It failed at the federal level, but they were able to get 38 states to pass a form of the Blaine Amendment, and over the next 80 years or so. And we have one here in Virginia, and it's been one of the major obstacles and arguments against of passing some, education savings accounts legislation. Mm-hmm. And these last 5 years, these 3 rulings at the Supreme Court have chipped away at the Blaine Amendments. And essentially this last one, Carson versus Macon, is really not the final nail in the coffin, but it's really close. And so now I think that the Blaine Amendment in Virginia is unconstitutional, and we will have a very strong argument for passing this legislation and education here in Virginia.
And finally give the chance. And I know that under the McDonnell administration, they came up with the scholarship fund with tax incentivized contributions, but you'd still required a government oversight, and you had to be approved by a government board overseeing the scholarship. And I still said that's really, you can call it school choice, but if I have to get approved for it by a government board, it's not really money follows the parent, money follows the child kind of school choice.
No, and it's a tax credit, so you get a tax credit, and it's a great program. But if you donate to this to a scholarship granting organization, which is what we call them, then you get a 65% tax credit. So if you had a $10,000 state tax liability and you gave $10,000 to this granting organization, you'll get a $6,500 tax credit. And this program has grown over the last couple of years, over the last 10 years since McDonald signed it into law. And but it is strictly for low-income children, 300% or below the poverty line. But there's like 4,600 kids right now that take advantage of this program. Their parents apply for the scholarship at the scholarship granting organization, and then they use that money to go to a private school, mostly in urban settings, some in the rural settings. But it's a great program, but it's limited here in Virginia, and we're trying to expand that as well.
So you've just launched a new effort on Virginia educational opportunities. People can find out more about it at veoa.org. Craig DiSesa of the Middle Resolution, president of the Middle Resolution group, is on with us to talk about it. So was that the impetus of it, is to kind of have a place for parents who are looking for school choice opportunities to go in the Commonwealth to get help in accessing this?
Yeah, so the Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance was formed back in November after the governor was elected. Parental rights in education was a huge issue, as we know, in this past election. And so we have been, Middle Resolution has been fighting for more choice in education since 2015. And we introduced something called education savings accounts. And we actually got it passed twice, and McAuliffe and Northam both vetoed the bill. But basically, what that is just to explain what an ESA is what it does is if a child is in a public school, it's not working out, and a parent wants to remove that child, it would be just like removing a child if they were moving to another state or a new jurisdiction or district, or if they wanted to homeschool them or send them to private school. But in this case, a part of the money that pays for that child's education would follow the child into a bank account owned by the parents. It's a restricted bank account. In other words, they're limited on how they can use the money. And it's only about a third of the money that is used towards the child education in the public schools. The rest of that money, 2/3 of that money, would stay with the public school. So the public school gets loses one child. They have one less child to educate, but they get to keep 2/3 of the money. So really, it's a win for the public schools. And so we're trying to get that passed. But the VEOA, the Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance, is designed to be a very large coalition to train and educate people on what school education choice is, but also to advance parental rights in general. More transparency, for example, in our education system. And so it's a coalition that we're growing and that we're training folks on, first of all, what is education savings accounts, what are transparency what are the transparency legislation in the General Assembly we'd like to see passed, and then teach them how to grow their own sort of activist grassroots group within their community, and then train them on how to best effectively communicate with their legislator so they can go tell them, we want this in our community. And so we are asking, we've already formed quite a large coalition, and we've already started our trainings and so forth. So if anybody that's listening to this right now would like to learn more about this, they can go to, as you said, www.veoa.org, and they can join. You can click on something that says join, and you can join the coalition, and you can start joining our phone calls and some of our training. And there's a lot of resources on the website as well.
Craig DiSesa is on with us, president of the Middle Resolution, and just launching the Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance, which you should be checking out online at veoa.org. There, and talk about this because we've seen money follows this, and I'm glad it started right after, because I rarely hear politicians talk about school choice. When Governor Youngkin mentioned it 3 times in his victory night speech, and Lieutenant Governor Sears has been such an outspoken advocate for it, it does several things in the laboratories of where it has been tried. But one of the most interesting ones, and I think you mentioned it with the educational savings accounts as well, even if it's straight up vouchers, the public schools wind up doing better in the long run, and the municipal governments wind up becoming less likely to just pour money after education, because they know that if they're, I think Albemarle County in Virginia is about to spend $16,000 per student per year on their education, which is approaching twice what a private school costs for a parent to send it to them. But at least it also has the effect of reining in some of that spending.
Yeah, you're basically talking about free market in education. Milton Friedman, back in the late 50s, formed an organization called the Friedman Foundation, he and his wife, and his whole premise was, we're going to improve our education system through competition. And right now we don't really have competition in our public education system. It's a monopoly, especially here in Virginia, because we have very little education choice in Virginia. So you're exactly right. And they have demonstrated now, because education choice has been around for over 20 years throughout the country, and they've demonstrated that where you have education savings accounts, for example, in a district, the public schools do show improved scores and so forth. It's not this huge significant improvement, but it's they're consistently showing improvement in the public schools. And so the competition is good for everybody, and it helps the public schools. And we know that one of the arguments we keep hearing is, well, you allow these education savings accounts, all the parents are going to take their kids out of public school. That's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. Parents, majority of the parents will keep their kids in public school, and that's been demonstrated in studies, research, actually in what I would call pilot studies around the country, where they've offered up private education at really no cost to parents. Mm-hmm. And a majority of the parents still kept their kids in public schools. So the public schools aren't going anywhere. They're staying here, and we want them to get better. I mean, that's really what we want them to do. But we also want to provide parents with more options so they can better educate their children.
Is the chief opponent, and I realized in 2021 just how powerful the National Federation of Teachers is, and Randy Weingarten may be the most powerful American not named Soros. When Terry McAuliffe, who is not a dumb person, whether I disagree with his policies or not, he's won Herculean campaigns. He's expert. He's, as far as a politician goes, he is not an idiot. Yet, as he watched his support hemorrhage away, he kept going on with of course parents don't, it doubled down, tripled down on of course parents don't have any say in their kids' education. Is that how powerful this union is, and are they the biggest opponent to real opportunity for school choice, protecting the public school teacher? And do the rank and file teachers, as a subtext to that, realize that a competitive marketplace for their efforts would actually benefit them?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head on the nail with the unions. In Virginia, we don't have per se public unions, but the Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance, the Virginia School Board Association, the Superintendents Association of Virginia, they're all associations, but they act as unions. And the VEA actually pays dues to the National Education Association, or unions, basically. Right. And they oppose this because they see this as a threat to their dynasty, if you will. They see this as a threat to their money that's coming in.
Sure.
And so they're going to oppose this at every turn. And every time we've gone up to a committee hearing and we've presented the education savings account legislation, or you present the education improvement scholarship program, or try to expand it, we get opposition from them, and they're always saying, you're taking money from the public schools, you're leaving behind, all the really smart kids are going to leave, and you're going to leave behind the the not so smart kids, and it's just not true. That doesn't happen at all. But that's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of losing their funding, basically, because they get paid through dues by the teachers. And the public schools, for the most part, local public schools oppose it. Unless you're in a more conservative rural communities, sometimes they encourage this kind of thing. So that's where most of the opposition is coming from. And they can be pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? They can be really difficult. They don't even have a conversation with you about it. But with parents now coming out and saying, look, we want changes. We realize what's going on in our public schools. COVID revealed a lot of what was going on. And then you mentioned, of course, Terry McAuliffe making that gaffe in the second debate with Governor Youngkin and then doubling down on it the next day. I mean, it demonstrates what they truly believe. Parents should not be involved in their child's education. They know better. That's their attitude, and it's really unfortunate.
Well, that's what I say. It's frightening to see the power of this organization because they're also the reason underperforming or malperforming teachers stay in the schools, and I think parents need to be awakened to this because I think this is what's really, as much as politicians tend to be a bane, when they're trying to insert themselves in the school. But the educational unions, even soft-core ones in Virginia, are really harming the kids at the end of the day. Yeah,
that's true, and I'm not sure. I don't know what they believe or if they understand that. But I will tell you that their primary interest is not the education of the children, even though that's what they'll tell you. And I've seen lobbyists for the I think it was the Virginia School Board Association when he was asked in a committee hearing, sir, what is the goal of your organization? Is it to provide a quality education, or the public schools? What is the goal of public schools? Is it to provide a quality education, or is it to protect the teachers? And he didn't respond. He sat there. He was silent. And the silence was deafening because he revealed that it's about protecting teachers and administrators and things like that. And they do need, teachers. And I don't want to belittle the teachers. There are great teachers out there working very hard to educate our children. But what the administrations have done, what the state has done, what the federal government has done to these teachers, and preventing them, for example, from disciplining kids. That has allowed fights and crime and so forth, and these kind of things happening in schools where they've become unsafe. So these folks really are more interested in protecting what they have than they are for educating children.
So how hard would it be to, I guess you mentioned a couple of times even just the educational savings accounts got vetoed on the governor's desk. It was certainly flipping the General Assembly is there. Unfortunately, I have been around too many of these people. I worry that the average conservative Republican, if you will, or even a school choice Democrat may not want to actually resolve this issue because then they lose the campaign point. So I guess it really becomes imperative for the folks at the Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance to keep that pressure on, to let them know that, okay, if this issue gets settled, that's okay, there will be more.
Yeah, and that's why we formed the alliance, this huge coalition, because legislators need to hear from their constituents, and their constituents need to be repeatedly telling them, we want this, we want more options for our children's education, and we want more transparency within the public schools. We want to know what's going on. As I said earlier, COVID has revealed a lot of things that parents had no idea what was going on in the schools. So it's this is how things are. This is how you get things done in politics, right? You get out there and you show a strong force for an issue that you want to advocate for, and then you get it passed. You mentioned the General Assembly, and you've got we've got the House. The Republicans have the House, control of the House. We don't have control of the Senate. And that we got education savings accounts passed this year at the House level, and the governor would sign the bill if he came to his desk. But the Democrats, they fought hard to prevent that. They killed it right away as soon as it got over to the Senate. So we do have to. This is going to be an issue next year in the during the elections for the Senate and the House, and that's one of our goals is to make it what I call a wedge issue, to show there is a big difference between the Democrats and the Republicans on this issue. And I will say though that there are some Republicans, unfortunately, who are not real keen on this idea. On education choice. So they're ones we also have to go and talk to and convince them this is the right thing for our children.
It's amazing to me because you brought up Milton Friedman and the foundation that he and his wife started. I think it's edchoice. I forget the web address for it, but these politicians will talk about Milton Friedman until you're blue in the face on economic policy, and then you bring up school choice, and you what? No, that's great. You say Milton Friedman, you were just talking about tax policy from.
Yeah, that's true. It's edchoice.org. By the way. The Milton Friedman Foundation rebranded, changed their name back, I don't know, it's probably been 8 years ago.
Right.
But
I couldn't remember.
Basically, the same principle applies. We're looking for a free market in our education system. And the more we get that, the better our education system is going to be all around, including the public schools.
Yep.
And I want to reiterate that we are not opposed to public schools at all.
No.
We want our public schools to do a better job. And, the governor came out with his report back in May. And basically what they said was we're sliding backwards. We reduced the standards over the last two administrations. And our scores are going down, not going up. And if you compare them to the national scores, we are not doing well.
No.
And so, and the Democrats came out and they blasted him and they said he's cherry picking data and so forth. Well, data happens to be the Secretary of Education's strong suit. She is very data focused, and they looked very hard at the data, and they were able to they discovered that we are not doing as well as we could be here in Virginia in the public schools.
Well, and that's one of the things that I think gets fixed, especially when you talk about we have wonderful homeschool co-ops and things like that. There's so many varieties of things that parents do, and I hope they all go to the Virginia Education Opportunity Alliance. It's a project, as it were, of the Middle Resolution PAC. It's middleresolution.org. But you, more importantly, go to veoa.org. Craig DiSesa, thank you so much again for your visit this week to Freedom and Prosperity Radio.
Thank you so much, Joe. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, sir. We continue to talk families, children, and Supreme Court rulings as Todd Gackey joins us next from the Family Foundation, and we're going to talk about school choice a little bit. We're also going to talk about the Dobbs decision as well, coming up next on Freedom and Prosperity Radio.